In those same 1936 Chicago and Pittsburgh productions, Richard Carlson played the bookkeeper and secretary to Boren Faulkner. He began 2 years on Broadway the following year, and in 1938 entered movies. In Hollywood films of the 1940s, Richard Carlson played many young men with an academic demeanor, and he continued in movies and television through 1975.
Well, I'm calling you like you said because I'm going to be on... Oh, thank you. Well, it's nice of you to say so. Oh, no, ma'am. I reckon it was fixing to stop anyway. I came on at the end. Thank you very much. Well, I'd be glad to, sir. Yes, I have the address. I'll be up there directly. I'm sorry about not seeing you, Jeannie. Oh, now you're making it sound much more serious than it really is.
Carlson may be best remembered for starring in the 1954 movie in 3D, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Carlson that same year also played the bookkeeper's secretary in Dennis, Massachusetts, where a fellow cast member would go on to achieve even greater fame. Lee J. Cobb would star in the original Broadway production of Death of a Salesman and, in the 1957 movie of 12 Angry Men, played the bigot juror, the angriest of the 12. His talent was recognized by Broadway casting directors way back in 1935 and 1936, so he often went from show to show. Early in a 6-month break in Broadway work, he played the private investigator who shadowed Boren Faulkner in the aforementioned 1936 Massachusetts production of Night of January 16th. Cobb entered the movies in 1937, alternating stage and screen thereafter. You're seeing him in one of those 1937 movies.
Why don't you have the sheriff arrest them? While he's about it, I ought to have him arrest you too. An accessory after the fact.
William Harrigan was a stage veteran when he played Guts Regan in Bronxville in summer 1936. He had made his Broadway debut 30 years earlier, and following this production would work on Broadway again over the next 21 years. He knew someone he could consult on the role of Guts Regan. Harrigan's sister Netta had played Karen Andre in San Francisco and Hollywood earlier that year.
What? Your whole crooked outfit blew up with it. Now, wait a minute. Television's only a matter of time. An investment for the future. We need their money to develop it. You ought to get on the bandwagon yourself, Ruth. You can make more money in a day than even I pay you in a week.
Also playing Guts Regan during the summer of 1936 was the actor who had spent more time with the playwright than any other actor. As the program for this Stony Creek, Connecticut production makes clear, Frank O'Connor was the husband of playwright Ayn Rand. The biographical sketch was otherwise fanciful, as O'Connor had not been in movies as a child, and his appearance in Orphans of the Storm was too inconsequential for him to be remembered for it. You may have noticed an actor already discussed, Robert Shane, atop the cast. Shane took his experience in the Broadway production and parlayed it into hires in many more cities, large and small. The next actor discussed here did likewise. J. Arthur Young had little to say in the original Broadway production of Night of January 16. As the judge, he had about 36 lines, all short, many just a single word. Nonetheless, those months of performances exposed him so thoroughly to the larger roles that he was a wise choice for producers in other cities in casting the attorney. In this 1941 film, he demonstrates skill at testifying.
All of a sudden, I saw a light come on in Cassie's library. I peeked through the window and saw Garson Denham snooping, looking behind pictures.
Will you marry me?
Cassie, do you mean it?
The lady is Sarah Patton, the maid in the Broadway production.
Maybe we can wake up Judge Hoskins and get hitched tonight.
Darling.
With Sarah Patton and J. Arthur Young both veterans of the Broadway production, this movie was a reunion. Alexis Smith was leading lady to the major leading men at Warner Brothers throughout the 1940s, but that followed from her being spotted by a talent scout who saw her in her college's student production of Night of January 16th.
Who thrills you the most?
You'd never guess. I just finished a love scene with him and he's wonderful.
Who?
She was in her 20s during all of her movies of the 1940s, the decade when she most frequently was co-starred in movies. The stars she played opposite included Humphrey Bogart, Cary Grant, Jack Benny, and Errol Flynn. Charles Bronson was one of the biggest movie stars of the 1970s and 1980s, starring in vigilante and other action movies. This obituary reports that Bronson made his New York stage debut in a late 1940s revival of Night of January 16th. We'll look at him in 1950s television dramas. Bronson could play violent, conceited criminals.
Sure, I killed him. Don't you see? This guy, he stood in the way of my getting the 25 grand I promised you. Sure, I killed him.
Next you'll see, Bronson could also play a man of the mind.
When a man stops you from getting something you want, what else you do? Actually, the most important problem isn't the damage to the skull, it's the brain. You see, many times there can be damage to the skull without any injury to the brain at all. You might compare it to a crate of glassware. There's no great harm done if the crate happens to be cracked or broken. It's the contents inside the crate you worry about.
While we're talking about celebrities who emerged from acting roles in Night of January 16th, it's worth talking about celebrities who served as jurors on stage in Night of January 16th. Ayn Rand, in her introduction to the play, stated that the producer of the Broadway production
was besieged by requests from celebrities and others who wanted to sit on that jury.
She wrote that there was a performance with Helen Keller as jury foreman where
all the members of the jury and most of the audience were blind. The verdict that night was guilty.
Ayn Rand doesn't say why this would be, but one might surmise that blind people, being as dependent as they are upon others, would not identify with self-sufficient people in choosing from among evidence balanced between two sides. A New York Times story about that performance reported that Helen Keller herself voted for the defendant's acquittal, but was outvoted by the other jurors. Keller said that the evidence was nicely balanced. A story appearing a few days after opening night reported that sitting on the jury was Jack Dempsey, former heavyweight boxing champion of the world. 3 weeks after the opening, one juror was movie star Ricardo Cortez, who during the early 1930s was lead actor in several Warner Brothers dramas.
White, poor, honest. Ambition? Not to have to work for a living, so I could go to the south of France and write a book.
Playing similar roles at Paramount was George Raft,
At your service.
whose breakout role in Scarface had been 3 years prior to Night of January 16 on Broadway. Raft was a juror on Broadway.
So many minds, so many opinions.
And yours, of course, are the correct ones.
Why not?
A future Hollywood producer who served as Broadway juror was James Roosevelt, whose opportunities were enhanced by his father being America's president at the time. The 1936 opening day performances in Hollywood at the El Capitan, reuniting the 5 leads from the San Francisco production recently closed, was, according to the Los Angeles Times and Variety, overshadowed by notables in the jury box, including Leo Carrillo, giving energetic performances as supporting player in many movies, famous Western star Tom Mix, a star of the silence, still a film star. You're seeing him in a lead role in 1935. Frank Craven, who is yet to become known as the narrator of Our Town. Pat O'Brien, already a star at Warner Brothers. Fred Stone, who on Broadway had been the original Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, and in 1936 playing a lead movie role at RKO. Jesse Lasky, one of the founders of Paramount, who, after a long career there, had now recently embarked on a new career as an independent producer. Sol Lesser, another studio executive who also had success as an independent producer. Jerry Giesler, well-known Hollywood attorney. Celebrities didn't end with the opening night performances. Within 3 weeks, additional jurors had included
The one, the only...
Groucho Marx, who took a bow on stage. Lila Lee, leading lady in low-budget feature films. Major studio leading lady Dolores Del Rio. Hoot Gibson, Western star. Gail Patrick. She would have a lot more experience with courtroom drama as the executive producer of all 9 seasons of the Perry Mason television series in the 1950s and 1960s. The Los Angeles Times reported that actor Guy Bates Post admitted that throughout the play he unconsciously acted, presumably causing his face and body to take on an outward appearance suitable for the role of juror. One star who declined jury service was Una Merkel, begging off the assignment by declaring, "I don't believe in capital punishment."
everybody to their own opinion. Well, I think it's the dearest, kindest, most beautiful face in the whole world.
In 1936, the London production on its opening night had on its jury already established star actor Raymond Massey. 12 years later, Raymond Massey would be in America on a Warner Brothers soundstage playing the role of Gail Wynan in The Fountainhead. No part of Atlas Shrugged was filmed until after Ayn Rand's death, and posthumous films are not covered by this video. Ayn Rand did make casting choices during her years after Atlas Shrugged was published in 1957. You're seeing some of them here. An ad for the book on the date of publication has the book's hero represented by a photo of Frank O'Connor, the novelist's husband. Frank O'Connor also strongly resembles those illustrations of Howard Rourke in the newspaper comic strip serial which appeared 1945 to 1946. Late in life, Ayn Rand considered for the role of James Taggart, a villain in Atlas Shrugged, Ned Beatty, who won an Academy Award for playing a megalomaniac corporate head in Network. In earlier years, her choice for the role was the more suave Vincent Price.
There's no electricity, no phone, no one within miles, so no way to call for help.
This film is from the year after Atlas Shrugged was published.
So if any of you decide not to stay for the party, you must let me know before midnight. Of course, if you leave, I shan't be able to pay you anything.
There are more roles, and many actors were considered for some of them. This survey has provided a sample.